Today we're going to talk about doing the daily inspections on fuel trucks. According to ATA 103, there are 15 items on your truck that need to be inspected every single day. Now, as an industry, we're pretty good about doing the sumps. Now, the nuances of proper technique and things like that, that's a whole other conversation, but I am confident that the sumps are getting done every day. That's 2 out of the 15. Now, what typically happens at most operations is someone will go out and do the sumps, and then they'll come back inside, pull out the notebook, record the sumps, and then just get a hand cramp right in their letter S down the column for the rest of the day. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that is entirely normal in this business. Some places choose to do a complete inspection first thing in the morning. This is typically a top-down decision that says you have to inspect every piece of equipment before you use it. And that's great. Let's just knock it out first thing in the morning. Let's give ourselves a fresh start. Let's go find problems before they find us. And you can walk into most line offices in the country and pull a dusty, neglected 3-ring binder off the shelf that says operations manual on it, and you'll probably find a page in there that says the same thing: inspect the equipment before you use it. It's pretty rare that actually happens, but the thought is there. And if that decision does come down from the top, we just say on the ground, "Got you, boss, no problem, we'll get it done." But are you sure you know what you're asking? According to the latest revision of ATA 103, 2019.1, only one of those 15 items needs to be done before the first fueling of the day, and that is sumping the tanks on the trucks. That's the only item that needs to be done before you go fuel an aircraft. Everything else just needs to be checked at some point throughout the day. And that's a completely pragmatic requirement, but some places still choose to do that complete inspection first thing in the morning. So let's ask a few basic questions to start planning for this daily process. Question number 1. How do you define the first fueling of the day? Number 2, is your operation 24-hour or not? And number 3, can you recirculate fuel on a full truck? ATA 103 does not define the first fueling of the day. It's up to you. So you have to come up with your own definition. Is that the first fueling after midnight? Is it the first one on the first shift? Is it the first one on the first page? There may be some other option out there. But you have to come up with your own definition of that. And you have to be aware that whatever your choice is going to affect your operation one way or another. If you choose to go with the first fueling after midnight and you're a 24-hour operation, that could affect your team if they're doing fuelings throughout the night. If it's 11:45 at night and I'm fueling an aircraft and I have to do another one right after this, I wrap up that fueling, it's now 12:08, just 8 minutes after midnight. Do I have to stop what I'm doing and go do a daily inspection before I go fuel that next airplane? That's what's going to have to happen if you choose to stick with that first one after midnight rule. If your operation is not 24-hour, how do late night callouts or early starts factor in? If you have that guy who gets called out in the middle of the night to come fuel that medical helicopter, is he going to have to do a daily inspection before he fuels that helicopter? Or an early start. If your operation typically opens at 6 a.m., but you have that base customer that wants to be online at 5:30, so the guys are coming in at 5, now we're getting into non-standard operations. How does this daily check factor into that non-standard operation? And that third question is, can you recirculate fuel on a full truck? Some trucks can, and some trucks cannot. There are several items on this daily inspection that require fuel to be moving through the system in order to be checked. Again, some trucks can recirculate when they're full and some cannot. There are certainly trucks coming off the production lines today with smart sensors and gizmos that know that when this is open and that's open, we're going to bypass the high-level shutoff so I can recirculate when the truck is full. Those trucks are certainly out there, but they're not common. So if you are at the majority of operations that don't have those, you have to plan for what you have. Now, something else that's really common at FBOs is you'll have one truck that's brand new, 100% compliant. It's got all the brand new bells and whistles and gizmos on it, and it's going to be sitting right next to some hunk of junk from the mid-'80s. And so the process that you develop for this one truck may not work for this truck. I don't think I've ever seen 2 trucks parked next to each other that have precisely the same configuration. This one has a peak hold feature on the DP gauge. This one does not. This one may have a dedicated recirculation connection and this one does not. This one has different pressure controls than this one. Get to know your equipment. They're probably going to be different. And so develop a process that works for this one as well as for this one. So at this point in the planning process, get to know your operation, get to know your equipment. Bring in your stakeholders when you make these decisions. Clearly communicate them, document them, and add these decisions into your operations manuals and your training syllabus. So what do they need in order to do these checks? Well, really the only piece of equipment that you need is a sump bucket. Probably going to need a spill pad to clean out that bucket in between samples, and obviously you're going to need PPE. But really that's the only equipment that you're going to need. So how long do these checks take? Well, with all of these items, if you want to do that complete check, that could take anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes per truck. So if you only have one jet fuel truck and one avgas truck, not a problem. But some places have 6, 7, 8, 9, or even more trucks. So if you want to do those complete inspections first thing in the morning, you need to understand, do the math, how much time are you going to have to budget for these inspections. And not only are we going to be doing the checks, but you're also going to be documenting it. So you have to factor in how this check is going to be documented. What is the process for documenting it? If your system is pen and paper, which is still very common in the industry, where are those records kept? Are they going to bring that notebook out to the truck with them, or are they just going to do the check and then fill out the record when they get back? Are they going to remember all that? Are they going to remember to do it before they leave for the day? If it's a digital system, are they doing it on their own personal phone? Are they doing it on a company phone, a tablet? You know, when and where is that record for the documentation of this check? Where does that come into play? And something else to factor in is the location of everything. Where do they keep the equipment to do the check? Where do they keep the buckets? Where does good fuel go? You draw that sample. If it's good fuel that you want to recover, where does that fuel go? If it's bad fuel that you're not going to recover that becomes waste, where does that go? And where physically around the facility are all these places? Some places are lucky enough to have the trucks, the fuel farm, the recovery, and the hazardous waste locker all co-located right next to each other. Some places, those are dispersed across the facility. Some places even keep a fuel truck on the opposite side of the airport. Develop a process for that truck also. So now let's talk about those 15 items that are required during a daily check. Of those 15 items, there's 2 of them that are most likely not applicable. Those are going to be lift platforms and surge and relief tanks. Lift platforms. If your fuel truck has an actual, like a cherry picker or a lift on the back of it that it can access the high wings of like an Airbus or a 757, that's a lift platform. There are certainly plenty of FBOs that are out there that service that kind of traffic, but there are many that don't. So if you're at an operation that does not have a lift platform on any of your fuel trucks, you can go ahead and just cross that off as not applicable. Next is surge and relief tanks. Surge and relief tanks, that's something that's specific to hydrant fueling systems, not applicable to fuel trucks at all. So we'll go ahead and cross that one off as well. So that leaves 13 items. 13 items that are most likely going to be applicable to your operation and your equipment. Of those 13, there are 6 items that can be checked when the truck is cold, as in the truck does not need to be turned on at all. That means there are 7 that at the very least the truck needs to be turned on, and there may be some other conditions that apply as well. Within that 7, there are 3 items that require fuel to be moving through the system in order to capture data. And of those 3, there's 1 that requires fuel to be moving into the bottom load connection, not a separate recirculation connection. So again, there are 6 items that can be checked when the truck's cold, 7 items when the truck is going to be hot. And I've got those kind of color-coded here. Blue for cold, red for hot. And so those 3 that require fuel to be moving through the system, those are the ones where you have to know, can your truck recirculate when the truck is full? Because it's typical at most places at the end of the day, those trucks are going to be topped off. And so first thing in the morning, those trucks are going to be full. And if you want to do that inspection first thing in the morning, most likely the trucks are going to be full. Can you or can you not recirculate under that condition? If you're at a 24-hour operation, most likely you'll expect this check to be completed by the overnight shift before the morning shift arrives. And that's a little bit of teamwork, set the guys up for success, but also because the overnight shift will typically, not always, but typically have more time on their hands to complete this check. If you're not 24-hour, then you'll be expecting this check to be completed by the morning shift as soon as they arrive. And again, how long is this going to take? Either way, there will more than likely be a few things on this check that you won't be able to check first thing in the morning. That means that this check will be started by one group of people and may have to be completed by another group. So how do you capture this data? Well, the filter DP, the nozzle pressure, those can be captured during an aircraft fueling, and the bottom load pre-check, that has to be checked when the truck is being topped off. And at most places, you can't really predict when the truck is going to be topped off. You may have a really busy morning where it got topped off by the morning shift. You may have a slower day where the truck's not going to get topped off until the second shift, or if you're 24-hour, even by the overnight shift. So you have an inspection that's being started by one group of people that likely won't be completed until later by another group. All of your fuelers should be trained on all of these checkpoints, and it's really helpful if you can give them a place to record it throughout the day. If you're still using paper truck logs, I would suggest adding a couple of extra boxes on those truck logs to give them a place to write down the filter DP, the nozzle pressure, and the bottom load pre-check throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, when those logs come out of the trucks and get brought in, whoever is in charge of your QC records can refer to those truck logs and use the data on there to fill in the QC record. And this process will probably be different for your jet fuel truck versus your avgas truck, because ATA 103 only covers jet fuel. It doesn't cover avgas, and there is no avgas equivalent to ATA 103. And so some of these data points, the filter DP and the bottom load pre-check, you have no choice but to gather them at a later time, because you can't recirculate on an avgas truck unless you want to take that overwing hose over the top, which I don't suggest doing. But short of doing that, you have no choice but to gather this data at a different time. So at the end of the day, just be aware of the limitations if you want these checks to be done first thing in the morning. On the other end, it doesn't have to be just doing the sumps and then guessing at everything else. These checks can be done every day, no matter what your situation is. But a little bit of training, a little bit of planning can go a long way. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to further this discussion, feel free to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jason Saul. You can look at my website, maxqfuel.com. And like I said before, I've put together a short guidebook that covers this topic and a few others, and that book's called Beyond the Standard, and you can find that on my website as well. Again, thank you for watching. Be safe, be smart, and remember, it's always okay to stop and ask questions.